Greetings, my friends. I wanted to give you, my very special supporters, something back, something more back. I know I'm giving you what I can, but I don't feel it's enough. So I thought what I'd try and do and try and get into the habit of doing is coming to talk to you personally every few weeks, maybe every month, depending on how much news there is to share with you, to give you that kind of insight into what's going on behind the scenes on the Flying Reporter channel. So this might be stuff that I don't talk about on the main channel. It might be stuff that I later talk about on the main channel, but I want you to know about it first. As I say, it will depend on how much is going on, because sometimes there's nothing to speak of, or I've told you it all anyway. But this was a good moment because there are a few things going on that I wanted to share with you and give you something back. Firstly, about the YouTube channel and your support specifically, and I can't thank you enough for the support that you've given me, both in responding to comments, sending me emails, and of course your financial contribution as well. And it really does help. Some of you might think perhaps that I'm rolling in it, or your contributions, but I just wanted to sort of set the record straight on that. Nobody's really questioned me about it, but I suppose I wonder if you've been thinking where that money's been going. None of your money goes towards my flying hobby in itself. Out of my pocket, I pay for my flying, my training, and the maintenance and so on of the aircraft, you know, looking after the share of Oscar Romeo. Where your money has been going is basically helping me to break even in terms of making the YouTube videos. And in this last year will be the first year since making these videos that at the end of the year I'm going to break even, which is an extraordinary thought really. I've put thousands of pounds into doing this, from buying cameras, cables, equipment and so on and so forth. There are website subscriptions. Anyway, I won't bore you with it. Basically, this will be, I think, the first year that I will be coming close to breaking even. And I have things that I need to purchase to keep the channel going. So it's a never-ending process, really. That's where your money has gone in the last year. On top of that, you know, the trip to Europe that I did last May, I bought a lot of extra equipment for that. There's the mileage, for example, if I go off and do some filming somewhere, like I'm going to tell you in a minute about something I did last weekend. You know, there are hotel bills and petrol money and so on and so forth. So thank you for everything you've done. Spread the word if you can, because what I want to do is I want to improve this channel. And at the moment we're kind of sitting still. I suppose what I have achieved over the last year is the frequency of video reports has definitely gone up from maybe something like once a month to once every 2 weeks. I know it's not always regular. It really does depend on what's going on in the rest of my life. One thing I'm particularly pleased about is that I got ahead with myself with my filming this year for the first time, which meant I had probably 6 films in the can, if not more. And that was thanks to the Europe trip, which of course kept us going for quite some time over the summer. And it's meant that in this downtime, with Oscar Romeo stuck in the hangar with no engine, it's meant I've been able to keep the content coming through. I lost a lot of subscribers actually, well not a lot, I lost a few subscribers, a few paying subscribers when word was announced that Oscar Romeo's engine had failed. And I think that's because people thought that, well, that's the end of the videos then. The Flying Reporter channel is down, it's off air for 2 months. That's not the case at all. As you've seen, I managed to get ahead of myself and we've kept the content coming through, and some great content, I'm sure you'd agree. So yeah, I think people are fickle, but you guys have stuck with me, so thank you for that. And I hope you've enjoyed the content that I've been able to put out over these last few weeks. And well, I just want to say thank you. You guys are brilliant. So thank you so much. It really does mean a lot. I'm going to try and push the paying subscriptions a little bit more this year. It's always a fine balance because you don't want to sound like you're begging. And there's so much content on YouTube, and I'm grateful that people bother to watch it, quite frankly. But it would be nice to be able to do more. I suppose In an ideal world, I will be able to cut down more of the full-time work that I do as a BBC reporter. That would be ideal, and do more of what I want to do, which is making flying content. I can't do that at the moment. I can't afford to do that. And of course, so far, none of the money that I've raised through your subscriptions has paid for any of my time. When I say I break even, that's simply in costs. I probably spend 2 to 3 days working on each film, and that's perhaps twice a month. So that's 6 days a month that I put into making these films and this content for you, managing the YouTube and managing the social media and so on. And I've not taken any money away from your subscriptions to cover that cost. In an ideal world, it would start paying for itself, start paying a bit for my time as well. I can invest more in the equipment, more in the time, more in the content, the thinking, the creative part of it. So there's just a little update on the channel. The channel's doing fantastically. We're almost at 11,000 subscribers on YouTube now, which is stunning. It really is stunning. And it's just great to hear that people love what I do. So that is wonderful. On the engine front, I have some news. I haven't shared this with the rest of the channel yet. Perhaps in time I will. We were hoping, well, we had the crankcase come back from America because it needed to be sort of filed down, or anyway, it needed work on it that could only be done in America, apparently. So that took a month. That delayed us by a month. Now, I think that crankcase, I'm pretty certain that crankcase has come back, but we've now got another delay. You may remember that we needed a new crankshaft because our crankshaft was worn so badly and corroded so badly. We needed a new one. There were delays in the manufacturing process for the Lycoming part, the crankshaft part, apparently. There was high demand for it, and it was on back order. So we opted for another version of the crankshaft that's perfectly acceptable. It's actually a little bit cheaper than the Lycoming part because we thought we'd get the aircraft in service sooner doing that. Unfortunately, their manufacturing process now has a delay, and it's looking like we're not going to get the crankshaft until early to mid-February. So whilst we plan to be in the air in February, that's not now going to happen probably until March. So that's an awful lot of downtime for Oscar Romeo, and we're all very disappointed by that, but there's absolutely nothing we could do. Some people have asked, why didn't you just buy a new engine off the shelf? You know, surely that would have been cheaper and you'd have been up and running much quicker. I have to say that I kind of delegate these decisions to people who are more in the know than I am. I don't profess to know very much about any of this. I'm learning as I go along. And the decision was taken to go the overhaul route, because usually that is cheaper. Unfortunately, once you're in the overhaul route and the engine has been stripped down and inspected, that's the route you're now on. You've spent so much money already stripping down the engine, you can't suddenly go, ooh, do you know what, my engine's in a right old state, it's going to cost an awful lot to overhaul it, let's get a new one off the shelf. You'd be paying double pretty much if you did that. So you have to stick with the route you've chosen, and it's unfortunate. We think we're going to get a fantastic engine when it comes back. It's going to see us through another, 20 odd years, I don't know. But let's see. So that's the update on the engine. Apologies for that. I'm still planning to go back and see the overhaul process, and I've been obviously in touch with Nicholson McLaren who are doing that, and they're happy to welcome me back. So I'm hoping to make some content around that when the time comes. Anyway, I hope you've got a nice cup of tea, because I've got a cup of tea here that I'm just going to take a sip of. Not masses more to go, don't worry, don't fall asleep. I wanted to talk a bit about my friend Simon. If you've seen my most recent video, you will have seen that a friend of the channel, Simon Moores, passed away. He was in a really unpleasant air crash in Spain. He was flying a Arrow 3 from Portugal to the UK, along with another pilot friend of his, David Hockings, who owns the aeroplane. And I know I've made a video and I've done a tribute, but I suppose I just wanted to say how much this has affected me. Simon was not a really close friend of mine. We probably knew each other 3 or 4 years, maybe longer, but you know, we've become closer friends in the last 3 or 4 years. Simon was a councillor at the local authority, and that's where I first met him at one district council, and would bump into him every so often. I first met him at a council meeting down in Margate, I think it was. Then I was obviously flying, and I got to know that Simon flew these banners and so on, and did aerial photography. And we got chatting on Twitter and eventually got to know each other, and I started going on flights with him, helping him out, making videos with him. And I really enjoyed his company, and we had some great days out, and you know, it was lovely. And I suppose, you know, we weren't close. We didn't talk about our personal lives massively. We did a bit. We talked about the flight that he was going to undertake from Portugal. We discussed, you know, what IFR flight levels he was likely to get, at what altitude or flight level he would require oxygen. He talked to me about the timings and things like that, but we didn't talk much about it, but we did talk about the flight, and we tweeted each other the day before. And I remember thinking on the day that he was due to land back at Lydd, I'd been working, and I looked on Flight Radar because he'd given me the registration number of the aircraft they were flying, and I looked on Flight Radar and I could see that the track stopped somewhere in Spain. And you know, Flight Radar can do that, can't it? You know, sometimes it doesn't cover the whole route. So I didn't think much of it. And then I woke up sort of 7 o'clock the next morning. This would be the Thursday, the day after he was due to arrive. And I tweeted him and I texted him, and there was nothing. And there was nothing on Twitter, which is so unusual for Simon. You'd expect, you know, if he'd arrived back home safe, he would have posted a picture or sent a message or something, and he didn't. So I was now starting to get worried, and I Googled the registration number, and up came a report of a crash. And at first I thought, this is an old crash, this isn't the crash, this isn't a crash that's just happened, this is an old report of a crash, this can't be. And then I looked at the date and I could see it was yesterday's date, and my God, I was so shocked. I mean, it was complete disbelief, and I was shaking. And yeah, it had a really profound impact on me. I knew as a BBC journalist I needed to do something about it from that side of things. So began informing my colleagues, and then of course we needed to make sure that Simon's family knew. And in fact, what occupied me most during the course of this day, in addition to talking to some of David's colleagues and some of Simon's friends, I wanted to be sure that Simon's family knew what had happened, or knew what information there was at that time. And I knew that Simon had a son and a wife, and I was speaking to the Foreign Office and the police to try and find out if anyone was informing them of what had happened. And I think because they hadn't confirmed the identity, and I don't think they even still have confirmed the identities officially, because they hadn't done so, they were doing nothing. The Foreign Office, I passed the Foreign Office and the police Simon's family details. I wanted them to know, because I knew that, you know, these things move fast. Word gets out. Simon was all over social media, and it wouldn't take long for word to get out. And of course they'd be expecting him home, they'd be wondering where he is. So eventually, come about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, as more and more people started talking about what they suspected had happened, I just thought of Simon's son being at home there, wondering what had happened, nobody going around there to tell him officially, the police weren't going around there. So I went down to his home and told him what I knew. And of course, the news was somewhat expected because of the delay in getting home. but you can imagine what that was like. So for the next week, or even more, that didn't leave my mind. Every time I woke up, I'd think about Simon and what had happened, and every time I went to sleep, I'd dream about it or have nightmares about it. So I was quite surprised at how profound the impact of this crash had on me. And I suppose it's also interesting because of the trip I did over to Europe in the last spring, and the fact that we were flying through the mountains and we struggled, as you've seen on the videos, and it made me think back to there and the risks that I took. You know, at the time I saw them as calculated risks, and I had plenty of options. But it really made me think about my own flying, my own vulnerability. You know, if someone has experienced, some people, you know, 2 pilots as experienced as David and Simon were, you know, Simon was instrument rated, for example. If this can happen to them, then, you know, it can happen to any of us. So it's been a real wake-up call, and I haven't flown since. I seriously haven't flown since, and I've been worried about it. You know, with the weather being as it has been, you know, I certainly haven't been wanting to fly in instrument conditions. So let's see how things go. The confidence has definitely been knocked. Obviously, you know, I still feel very much for Simon and David's families, and you know, I hope they take some comfort in how loved Simon was and how his flying had inspired so many people. So, yeah, I just wanted to talk briefly about that. Now, on the subject of flying, let me just have another sip. Gosh, I'm rambling on, aren't I? I don't know. Look, you've got to give me some feedback on this. If this is not interesting for you, then you've got to let me know, because I'm just rambling here. I'm not going to put huge amounts of production into these videos. 2 more things I want to talk to you about. First, flying. I'm booked to go flying tomorrow. As you know, well, some of you may know, I've got the use of another PA-28 when I need to. It's costing me a bit more than Oscar Romeo would, but it means I can stay current, and I am current. But I do want to get up flying again after the crash that Simon had. I've got I think my single engine piston expires in the summer, so I need to do an hour's flight with a flying instructor. So tomorrow, I booked an aeroplane, I booked an instructor, and I'm hoping to go flying. I will try and film the flight. The weather's not good at the moment. Maybe later in the day it will be okay, so fingers crossed we'll get flying tomorrow. And I plan to do PFLs, practice forced landings, because I don't do many of those. I want to do some stalls. I want to do a couple of landings with my instructor, because I want to see if my landings are right. I find myself starting to flare quite early as I approach the runway. And I just want to see if I'm doing that right. Yeah, so that's what we're going to do tomorrow, hopefully. If not tomorrow, then we'll find another time. And finally, the final subject I want to talk about is some filming I did on Saturday. I went up to the West Midlands, or it might even be Shropshire. Anyway, up that way, to see Simon Keeling. Simon Keeling is a weather forecaster, and he runs Weather School, which is weather training for pilots, amongst other people. And he runs these special courses for pilots. And Simon invited me along to come and see his course. I did a bit of filming. I'm going to go back. I think there's 2 parts to this course. So I've been on the first course. I'm going to go on the second course in the spring, and I'm going to film some more with Simon. So that's a great video coming up. We're going to look at the Europe trip and see if we could learn any lessons about our forecasting and our thinking and our planning for that trip that we did, because as you know, we encountered a few difficulties, a couple of diverts. I have to say, part 1 was really interesting. It felt a bit like a PPL refresher. So when you do your PPL, your private pilot training, you learn about meteorology, and many of the themes that we learned in that course came up in Simon's course 2. So it was a great refresher of those things. Some of those things that you start relying more on the TAFs and the METARs than you do on the charts. You get a bit lazy, and well, certainly I have. So it's great to go back to the charts, because this week, you know, I knew 2 or 3 days ago that tomorrow's weather, there's a warm front coming through. It will be over us at about midday. I know that will extend for about 200 miles across the country, and I know what the weather's going to be like, what the cloud bases are going to be like, and so on and so forth, right? So it's great. You know, the TAFs aren't out yet, well, weren't out yet for Friday, but a few days ahead, I knew that was going to be a rough day. So it's great, honestly, to go back and remind ourselves how to do that, learn about air masses and fronts and so on and so forth. So fantastic. Part 2 is going to build on all of that knowledge that we've learnt on part 1. Now, my video is not going to be, you know, the course. It's going to be a taster. It's going to be talking about a few themes, and so I'm hoping that will be useful for you. So I'm going to wrap up there. Gosh, how long have I been talking? My camera doesn't tell me. I hope that's of interest to you. Give me some feedback. Let me know if this is the kind of thing that you want. You know, it's difficult to know how to give you stuff back for your contribution. So if you found this interesting, if you found this useful, it hasn't taken up massive amounts of my time, but it gives you an insight into what I'm thinking, what I'm doing, what I'm planning, and what's coming up. And I just thought that would be a nice way to give something back to you. So thanks for watching. Thanks for all your support, and I hope to see you back in the air very soon.